Pokemon is one of the largest media franchises in the world. It was created in 1996 and since then has generated billions of dollars in revenue, 122 video games, a successful card game, an anime with over 1,000 episodes, no, not that one, and a movie starring Ryan Reynolds. You'd think that the thing that started the franchise, the video game series, would be one of the highest quality products available on the market today, but unfortunately the quality and scope of their video games has become stagnant over the past few years. I and many other fans of the series share this opinion, and while I thought I could repress these feelings and take them out on strangers after I've had too much to drink, the recent release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has changed that. So congratulations to the random strangers in the Wetherspoons car park at 3 in the morning, you've been saved, because I'm going to use this video as a chance to discuss why the Pokemon franchise has been steadily declining in a similar fashion to my mental stability. I thought I'd only go as far back as the start of the mainline games on the Switch. I could definitely go further, but that'll take too long. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were announced in May 2018 and later released in November of the same year, and fans were less than happy, which is fair. The games were just Kanto again, except this time they had a worse catching mechanic intended to appeal to the fans of Pokemon Go.
What's the fucking point in me bringing you out? So I can catch a fucking Scyther!
With the benefit of hindsight, the Let's Go games were Game Freak's first games for the Switch, so working on a game and structure they're familiar with makes sense. The games look really nice and they work pretty well, unless you're in the hellscape of Viridian Forest.
What kind of place is this?
Honestly, I really don't have a strong opinion on these games. They're fine, but nowhere close to what the franchise is capable of, which may be a trend with the following titles, but I'll save that for later. Pokemon Sword and Shield introduced many things. A region based on the UK,
Birmingham is a fucking shithole! I hate the fucking place!
an easy way to burst your eardrums, and controversy. So much controversy. Pokemon Sword and Shield has its fair share of issues, such as the National Dex fiasco, horrible pop-in issues, N64 trees, really bad lag when playing online, and the nearly non-existent post-game content. The National Dex was the main thing that had people up in arms. Game Freak announced that the games wouldn't support all current Pokemon, which kind of slaps us in the face considering the tagline of the series is gotta catch 'em all. The companies behind the games provided many reasons for the cut, such as giving some Pokemon more time to shine in the game, creating higher quality models and animations, and giving the development team the freedom to create new ways to enjoy the game. I don't know about you, but it looks like they definitely reused 3DS models. Then in January 2020, 2 paid DLC expansions were announced for Sword and Shield, the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra. A DLC pass for one of the games, because of course they want people to buy that twice as well, costed half of one of the games brand new. The expansions themselves were fine. My main issue with them is that roughly half of the content, so basically one of the expansions, should have been included in the base game as post-game content. It would have been nice to visit the Isle of Armor after the main story as opposed to the single worst storyline in Pokemon history. At the end of the day, Sword and Shield aren't the worst games ever made, they're just painfully mediocre. They aren't representative of what Pokemon on a home console can be, and I think that's why people were so split when it came to these games. I'm a Sinnoh kid. My first game was Diamond, my favourite game in the series is Platinum, and my favourite Pokemon is the Spicy Simian.
Why? Monkey.
So I was definitely part of the fanbase hoping for Generation 4 remakes. There were 3 words that became a meme within the fandom. Sinnoh remakes confirmed. The background of Guzma's battle introduction is purple and blue, Sinnoh remakes confirmed. The official Pokemon Twitter account tweets an image containing a Generation 4 Pokemon, Sinnoh remakes confirmed. The name of Inteleon contains letters from the Generation 4 starter evolutions, Sinnoh remakes confirmed. But then in February 2021, we received a trailer, and it broke my fucking heart. No, you don't get to say that, you've ruined it now. Alongside the announcement of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, we also got another reveal, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Due to the volume of work to be done, the Generation 4 remakes were outsourced to ILCA, a developer who hasn't developed a game entirely on their own before. They'd only supported other developers up until this point in time. I have way too many issues with these games and I hate them with every fibre of my being. I still bought and played them on day one, but that's because I'm a slave to nostalgia and I have no backbone. I really don't want to dwell on these games too long, so I'll just do a lightning round of my issues with the games. Let's get the most obvious one out of the way first. The games look like shit. The art style is terrible and the models look worse than the Let's Go games and even the 3DS chibi style games. The character models in the overworld are trying to replicate the look of the DS sprites, but it just doesn't work. It's really hard for me to take Cyrus and his rants about destroying the universe seriously when he looks like he has a serious case of small man syndrome. These games were outsourced to ILCA, and as I said earlier, they had very little experience developing games on their own. If I hadn't seen the trailer and you told me the games were being outsourced to another studio but Junichi Masuda was attached as the director, I wouldn't have an issue with it. A new studio can bring fresh ideas to a stagnant franchise and innovate in ways the original team wouldn't. Yeah, no. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were described as faithful remakes. They copy the original games almost to a T, with the only additions being the features added in recent generations such as the Fairy type and the EXP share, and then the Grand Underground and Ramanas Park. There were some quality of life additions, but they're pretty much the same games as the originals that released in 2006. Because of this, the games carried over the issues of the original games, such as the bad pacing and the limited regional decks. They also brought over the exact same teams and levels for every trainer, with the exception of the Pokemon League and some post-game battles. The games became far too easy since the level curve was never adjusted with the experience share in mind, so you ended up over-leveled and overpowered. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are a fucking mess and should not exist. If you want to play Sinnoh, just play Platinum. I remember thinking that since Generation 4 remakes were outsourced, there were more resources available to work on Legends Arceus. If this game ended up terrible, I would have gone through the Geneva Convention like a shopping list. But thankfully, Legends Arceus was a refreshing twist on the Pokemon formula. It released in January 2022 and brought along brand new gameplay elements, a fun story and concept, and some absolute bangers. Legends Arceus saw your character meet God. He gives you a fancy new phone and leaves you in an unfamiliar place. Kinda like weird strangers who offer you Haribos on the street. You work alongside the Galaxy Expedition Squad to produce the first Pokédex of the region. You're able to snipe Pokemon to catch them, and you can hunt them as though they're real creatures. The game introduced a ton of new concepts, like a semi-open world, catching multiple Pokemon to complete the Dex entries, Alpha Pokemon, battles against Noble Pokemon, and one of the greatest final bosses in the entire series. The game looked a little bit undercooked when it came to visuals and art style, but everything else about the game was on point. The game acted as a sign that Game Freak was willing to innovate and was making steps in the right direction. I couldn't wait for the next main series games, which would surely be at least a year away from Legends Arceus, right? Just a month after Legends Arceus released, the newest Pokemon Presents revealed Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. These games were the start of the 9th generation of Pokemon and were due to release in November 2022, only 10 months after the last game released. The release date for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the most disappointed I've been in a very long time. The fact that these games have sold over 20 million units and are on track to become the best-selling games in the history of the franchise baffles me. I think the games are genuinely awful, and the fact that a significant patch hasn't been released as of March 2023 is appalling. But it's easy to take shots at a game without actually explaining why it's bad, so buckle up because this is going to be the longest section of the video by far. Before I get into my numerous problems with Scarlet and Violet, I'll list the things I did enjoy. The game's music is really good, which is the only consistent thing I've found with the mainline games. The final section of the game and the final battle are really cool. If the entire game felt like this, I'd be a lot happier. The story structure of having 3 separate paths that tie together at the very end is a great idea, and I'm surprised it took the games this long to try something like this. But better late than never, I guess. The concept of Paradox Pokemon is really interesting, but I'll say that the Scarlet forms are way better than the Robots. And that's about it. Now it's time for the shitstorm. The largest issue with the games is that they're badly optimized for the Switch. I didn't know the Switch could output games with a variable refresh rate, but it turns out Scarlet and Violet can switch from 30 FPS to 12 FPS on the fly. There are so many visual and game-breaking bugs throughout the game, and a stabilization patch is yet to be released. Twitter was full of people complaining about the game's technical performance on day one, and we got some beautiful clips. The games don't run well on the Switch, the console that Game Freak has been releasing games for since 2018. I know that everyone's going to run and blame the Switch's underpowered hardware, but that's definitely not to blame. When the console can run games like Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Mario Odyssey without any major hiccups, maybe it's time to start looking at how the games are optimized for the system rather than the system itself. Don't get me wrong, an update to the Switch hardware would be nice, but it's not at fault for the state of these games. Even without the technical issues, these games look awful. The environments, textures and layouts are just terrible. The desert looks like a basic outline for an in-game area before anything was placed there. It genuinely looks like a PS2 game. Considering this is meant to be the first open world of the series, you'd think they'd actually make a world that you enjoy looking at. Now instead of just ragging on how the games look and perform, I want to have a quick look at the way the games are designed. During the main game you're provided with 3 separate storylines, one where you battle the gyms and Pokemon League, another where you hunt the Titans of Paldea in search of special herbs, and a third where you fight against Team Star. This is a good idea, and I'm glad Pokemon's finally implementing more than one narrative. In the past it was all a part of the same storyline, whereas this game gives you a choice in how you tackle the story. But I'd argue that it only gives you the illusion of choice, and I'll explain why. Since the game's an open world, you're free to take on the badges in any order you choose, but there's actually an intended sequence that the game doesn't make very clear to the player. And to make this worse, the trainer having gym leaders be able to change the type of their ace Pokemon adds an element of uncertainty into the game and forces you to think on the fly in gym battles. If you're using a Charizard to run through a grass type gym and you're suddenly faced with a rock type Victory Bell, it's unexpected and it makes the battle a bit more exciting. But instead of this, the way terrestrialization is used in the main story is to convert other Pokemon to the type of the gym. I think the mechanic could have been implemented much more effectively, but at least the gym leaders use this generation's gimmick, which is more than I can say for X and Y. I'm not sure if this is due to the time crunch to get these games out, but there's a ton of instances where the games feel unfinished. The shops are just PNG screens, some of the animations are just off, and the gym designs and challenges are either just reused from Sword and Shield or are just low effort in general. People have been asking for voice acting in these games for years, and I'm definitely of the opinion that it's necessary at this point. Considering you have a gym battle where you participate in a silent rap battle, I think voice acting for these sections and cutscenes are a minimum. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are my least favourite games in the main series, which is a shame because I think the skeleton of a good game exists within them. But the games are unfinished and messy, and it's genuinely insulting as a fan that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company were more than willing to release games in this state. With the recent announcement of the upcoming DLC for the games, which you have to buy separately for each version again, I'm even more disappointed. The Pokemon Company were more than happy to ask fans for more money without even a mention of the work being done to fix these messy games. I'm sure the work is going on behind the scenes considering they mentioned it in a public statement shortly after the game's released, but an update would be much appreciated. In a similar fashion to how you presented with 3 starters at the beginning of a journey, I think there are 3 elements that comprise the root cause of this problem. I'll get this one out of the way first, but the Pokemon fanbase has time and time again proven that they'll buy absolutely anything with a Pokemon sticker on it.
I want shorter games with worse graphics, made by people who are paid more to work less. And I'm not kidding.
Before anyone comes at me for this, I am included within this group. I'm part of this problem. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are on track to become the highest selling games in the series. They've already sold 20 million copies and this number's still rising. If people are still paying money for these low effort and low quality experiences, the developer and publisher will continue to cut corners, because they know they can produce shit on a yearly basis and the fanbase will still pay top dollar for it. If I'm honest, I could see the Pokemon Company being the primary cause of this, and this is because they're obsessed with the money printing machine that is their title franchise. The Pokemon IP generates an insane amount of revenue. Pokemania swept the globe back in Generation 1, and while it's definitely gone through peaks and troughs, its revenue generating capabilities are unmatched. When a new set of games release, a slew of other products are released alongside them to capitalise on the hype of the fanbase. Trading cards, plushies, strategy guides, figures, posters, anime, movies, and this synergy between the different products of the Pokemon franchise is what makes the IP so valuable. The Pokemon Company have become obsessed with the yearly release cycle, because every year a brand new game comes out and that pushes all their other revenue streams to new heights. But this release cycle puts unnecessary pressure on the developers who struggle to keep up with the level of resources that they have.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man. Do you understand?
The time crunch that the devs face in order to meet their unreasonable deadlines has caused them to cut corners and produce lower quality experiences. It wasn't nearly as bad during previous generations because the limited power of the hardware they were working with, such as the DS and 3DS, meant that the scope of their projects couldn't be as large as they are now. The developers need to be given either more resources or a more lenient time frame in order to allow these games to reach their full potential. The yearly release cycle took a break between the Hoenn remakes and Sun and Moon, and I think the games were better for it. I think Game Freak's issue comes down to 3 main points. They're working towards unrealistic deadlines, they're not given the resources required to meet AAA standards, and they're overworked. I've already spoken about the yearly release cycle and how it's impacting the quality of the games, so I won't dwell on it. Game Freak revealed at the Computer Entertainment Developers Conference in 2022 that development on Scarlet and Violet began just as the work on Sword and Shield was coming to a close, roughly in late 2019. That seems like a good amount of time to work on these games, but the development of Pokemon Legends Arceus was running in parallel with this project, as Legends began development in 2018. Game Freak doesn't have a very large development team, with a total of 169 employees as of March 2022. Just for reference, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was worked on by 300 developers over a period of 4 years. Game Freak, a team a fraction of the size of Breath of the Wild, split their resources to work on 2 projects at the same time. I know that everybody is probably annoyed at Switch games being constantly compared to Breath of the Wild, but when the system launches with such a good game, it starts to become the standard of what experiences can be on this console. I know that there are a ton of opinions on this. I'm not in charge, so I have no say in the matter, but I'm going to weigh in anyway because I think it's fun to think about. If it was up to me, I'd prioritise a patch for Scarlet and Violet and take at least 2 years out of the release cycle. Fair enough, release the DLC, but just work on getting Scarlet and Violet into the state they should have been in at launch. And while you're at it, don't outsource the Black and White remakes. Give them a healthy development cycle with a fully dedicated team. Bring on more people at Game Freak so that they can have the resources to produce the best games they can. Taking a year or two without releasing a game will cause a slight dip in revenue, so to combat this, maybe let another developer make a spin-off, like how new Pokemon Snap came out in 2021. Fuck it, bring back the Ranger games or something. The year-long break between Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and Sun and Moon didn't result in the company going bankrupt, so I doubt taking slightly longer to release a game will cause the franchise to implode, especially considering the fact that the majority of the company's revenue comes from merchandise sales anyway. I'm not sure how to end this video. All I wanted to do was voice my disappointment with the recent trajectory of the Pokemon franchise and to explain why I feel this way. I'm hoping a change comes soon and I can start to look forward to playing these games again.